Under the scale, 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 under the scale.
Hello everyone, Tom here. I'd like to first thank Phish for that incredible Baker's Dozen set of shows, which will definitely go down in history. Certainly because of the quality of the music, but also in the incredible feat of not repeating a single song in 13 shows. I'm not sure if there's even another band out there that can do that. So congratulations, Phish, and thank you again. Before I start this episode, I want to say two things. One is about a friend of mine, Dawn Jenkins, who's going to be on a future episode. She's doing a much better job than I did of collecting Phish stories. At first I thought that Under the Scales would be doing more fan stories, but I changed our course away from that a bit. Dawn Jenkins has already got a lot of good ones, but she needs more for a book she's putting together. The book is called Things Are True That I Forget, a collection of Phish tour stories. When she gets enough, I'm going to have her on Under the Scales, and we'll have you read your own story, or else Dawn and I will read maybe 10 of our favorites, or something like that. Her email is phishtourstories@gmail.com. The second thing I have to tell you is, I'm still a one-man show here, and I'm going to change the Under the Scales schedule slightly to give me more time to edit each episode. Beginning in October, I'm switching to an every other Monday schedule. I'll release an episode, then take the following Monday off. The next one will be on again, etc. This will give me some breathing room between episodes to focus on sound quality, which I've been receiving some complaints and suggestions about, and to allow me to travel further to get some important interviews. Okay, with no further ado, let's begin.
All right, hello and welcome to Under the Scales. I'm in New York City, and I just saw show number 7 of the Baker's Dozen. So last night was the halfway point, and when I found out about Baker's Dozen, I quickly asked my friends with New York apartments if they would mind trading tickets for floor space. So I'm in my second New York residence now, in the home of my friend Mark Rechler and Jackie Rechler. Hi, Mark.
How's it going, Tom?
Oh, man, so much fun last night. I was thinking in the middle of last night's show, actually, the beginning of the second set was the beginning of the first set. That was like second
set was starting of the whole run, for sure. I had the same smile on my face.
Yeah.
I thought that too. And I was also like, oh, boy, we got another whole half to go.
Yep, exactly. Another whole half to go.
No.
Yeah, I know. We think that way, like, kind of, treasuring our sleep and everything.
Treasuring it and dreading. It's at the same time everything else I won't be doing this week and getting accomplished.
Right, exactly. The normal life gets on hold for 13 shows, which is a lot. It's amazing. But a lot of quality music has happened, and
sure
it was great. And then the whole second half started really with Blaze On, which was appropriate. And Mark, you think you heard them say Glaze On?
Look, it could have been in the air, or everyone else in their minds or their mouths. But I'm pretty sure when they came out of the jam, which was amazing, and Travis just sort of Glaze On.
Right.
Glaze. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. You'll have to find out. But I heard it. I think I'm almost positive.
You're probably right, and it makes perfect sense. So they've been branding, they branded this thing with the donuts so well and everything, and the donuts have been incredible, and I'm going to hopefully talk to the person responsible for that in an upcoming episode.
Yeah, that's amazing. The donuts have been unbelievable. I've had 2, and they were spectacular.
So a little bit about you, Mark. So I've asked Mark to co-host today's episode, which is actually featuring the guys in JazzIsPhish, a really awesome Phish cover band. And the reason that it's appropriate that Mark's here is because, Mark, you're quite a keyboardist in your own right. And I just saw a gig you did. Is that kind of your current thing going on right now?
I always have a lot of current things going on, but that's definitely a hot one that I'm in right now, which is young Brandon Taz Niederauer. He's an amazing, I can't even tell you, he's a prodigy guitarist in the School of Rock currently. I think he's finishing up his last of a 3-year run.
Let me clarify that. So the Broadway show School of Rock has a clear star, and his name is Taz.
Yes.
full name Brandon Niederauer. It's a great young 14-year-old who plays guitar spectacularly, and it's kind of fun. So like, there's some old school, rockers like Mark. No offense, Mark. Old school, and sitting there with a 14-year-old on stage.
There's an amazing band behind him. Elise Testone, who's singing all over the place. I think she's actually, sang with JazzIsPhish and a couple of connected pieces. She's all over. And the band is super tight, but Brandon is also, you'll see him, and I'm sure many of these Phish fans might have already, he sat in with Twiddle this week. He's sitting with everyone all the time. He's played with Greg Allman. He's played with George Clinton, P-Funk, and we don't have the time to list how many people he's done sit-ins with.
Right. Well, he's getting around, and it's smart, and you guys owe it to yourself to see Taz. And you will probably see him. He's making the rounds, and
Definitely.
He's got limitless energy, and he can sing extremely well too.
He sure can. And so when I'm not doing that, I have my own band. It's called Circus Mind, MIND, and we're a funk band out of New York, going on our 15th year. Started out in the wetlands, and still playing, a couple times a month, floating around the tri-state area. We have 2 CDs out. And then another band called Falling Water that does not even play out at all. It's a recording project. It's kind of dark, beautiful, Floyd-y kind of pop stuff. And then an electronica band called Outhouse that does play out once in a while. That is a pretty cool kind of concept.
Now, most Phish fans, anyone who went to Mexico may have seen Mark play sort of in an after-hours gig in the hotel. What was that sort of extra hotel, the furthest one?
So I have a little local celebrity status in Phish, Mexico, because Barcelona Palace is where we stayed, and there's a great little piano bar over there.
Right.
And so whether I wanted to or not, I always ended up on that piano, and we'd have a good 200 people doing sing-alongs late night, and there's nothing better than a happy Phish late night crowd, because they're just, you can't get a better crowd than that.
It's funny. So I didn't make it, even though I stayed this last time in Mexico at the Palace. A lot of my friends said, "Tom, you got to come to the piano bar. There's a great keyboard player." And I knew without they didn't know who you were.
Yeah,
I knew
so
it was
funny.
you.
Going through the garden still, yesterday I'm in the bathroom with Piano Man. Like, what's up, dude?
So you're recognized. So it's appropriate that we talk about seeing, you playing in a tropical setting, because that's how we met.
That's right. Correct.
Completely coincidentally, I was on a family, this is 10 years ago now, family vacation in the Dominican Republic. I'd seen one sort of crappy Club Med band after another, kind of rotating through there. And then suddenly, only one of like several caught my ear. And I just, I think my wife and family after dinner took off, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to stay and check this one out a little bit here. I like the sound of it. And sure enough, I was rewarded by, I think you played a little like a riff from Stash.
I'm sure I threw some little riff in there. I can never. It was a long time ago. I can't tell you what.
And
it was.
that's when I knew I had to come up and talk to you.
I was playing. Definitely, I was doing the Dead and the Stones and classic rock. It's an amazing gig. So I'm a Club Med artist, which is a great deal. Any musicians out there, I recommend you try to do it. You go on their website and click on Club Med artists and try to contact them. You send them an email, and it's just an amazing thing. It's basically a free vacation. I don't know what the rules are now. They may have changed it a few years, but you sign up, send them a disc, and the next thing you know, you got a free vacation. You go down for a week with the wife and the kids, if you're lucky, and you play an hour a day. So Tom, was so nice not to totally introduce himself, but yet befriend me. So we hung out all week. We had a great time. We talked music every night, and it wasn't until the night before he left to go home. He was like, "Hey man, I just wanted say goodbye. I'm leaving tomorrow." And I was like, "Great hanging out with you." And he was nice enough to say, I write lyrics for a band. I think you like them. I think we talked about them this week. I'm like, "Who's that?" And he's like, "Phish." And I was like, "Oh my God, you're Tom Marshall." I was like, "Thank God you didn't tell me that from the beginning, because I would have just been like, hey. So I really thank you, Tom, for that.
Well, you're welcome. That can go two ways. Like sometimes if I try to sense sometimes if a conversation is going well, and it's going well possibly in this case because I haven't said that I'm affiliated with Phish, then I kind of like leave it for a while. But I've also been in the situation where someone's like, I don't let people talk themselves like into a corner, by not saying who I am.
Sure.
For example, the example I'm thinking of is a person who started telling me how great Phish was, but how terrible the lyrics are.
Right.
And I hadn't yet said who. Right. So,
which brings me to another point, because we were having a conversation similar to this yesterday with someone, and this is a perfect opportunity for me to tell my Phish family that I think the amazing thing about you, Tom Marshall, besides being such an amazing, nice person and a great lyricist, is that you have a style to your lyrics, and for someone to come up with a style, I mean, that's like, Jimi Hendrix came up with a guitar style. Pablo Picasso, well, he came up with, numerous styles, Cubism, and Frank Gehry, let's say, of architecture. That is a style. And I cannot tell you another poet, lyricist, who has a certain thing about it that you could just say, oh my God, that sounds like a Phish lyric, that's a Tom Marshall lyric, and that's an amazing thing to do. And I want to say thank you for
I appreciate it.
Phish family.
Really, really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of love at the Baker's Dozen, and that was a nice sort of way to summarize it, I guess. Thank you so much. I've never really kind of thought about my style, but it's something that attracted Trey a long time ago.
Yeah,
I guess something
pretty cool.
that seems like a bunch of people like. A bunch of people definitely don't like,
and
but whatever.
But that's what life is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Not everyone likes everything.
So with that intro, Mark, I think we'll press pause on the recorder and wait for the two brothers from JazzIsPhish to show up, Adam and Matthew. And I believe if this last email I got is to be believed, maybe only one of the brothers is coming. But in any case, JazzIsPhish up next. All right, we're back, and now we are joined with Adam Chase, and it's still Mark and myself. And Adam, how are you doing? Thanks for coming.
Doing really good. Got to see an awesome Phish show last night.
Yeah, we were talking earlier. We did a little intro before you arrived, how we made it through. That marks the halfway point.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, halfway through yesterday was the halfway point of the Baker's Dozen. Have you caught a lot of shows or not?
No, we haven't. We've been traveling a lot. We just got back from Spain and Portugal, so we just kind of worked our way up to New York for our shows, and then fortunately we were able to see last night's show. And
Spain and Portugal on working music.
It was actually the first vacation we've taken in years, so it was a celebratory birthday vacation, and
awesome.
But yeah, the guys from the JBs from the James Brown group were out there touring, and then they came back the same time that we did, and we just played on Friday night with them. We have a project that we did together playing James Brown music.
All right. Well, we already talked about two bands without really explaining it. So let's just get your intro going here. So Adam is the drummer. The way I know you best is the drummer for an amazing combo called JazzIsPhish. Very jazzy, funky Phish cover band. And I saw you in Asbury Park in New Jersey at the Wonder Bar, and I was really surprised and very pleasantly surprised by how awesome you guys are.
Thank you.
And I'd seen Snarky Puppy, and the parallels are there. But of course, this is in a way, this is Snarky Puppy for Phish.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it. Because Snarky Puppy has that collective vibe where they have 20 musicians that are part of their family. And they kind of rotate based on availability. There are people who are always there, and then there's different people, like different drummers and keyboardists and stuff. And
it seems like that's a jazz tradition, kind of. It's like you come into town, and the best players who happen to be there join you on stage. Do you have that sort of thing going on?
Yeah, we have that. We have lots of guests whenever especially places like New York, where there's just an abundance of amazing players.
Right.
We always have different guest musicians.
I have a keyboard player for you.
yeah, this guy over here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, speaking of jazz tradition, it's a jazz tradition to cover, pop or other styles of music. It was started by, John Coltrane was a famous one with These Are a Few of My Favorite Things, and Miles Davis did covers. So that's a tradition too of covering, popular music in a jazz style interpretation. So that's kind of cool too.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite things. Dr. Lonnie Smith is an organist, famous B3 organist, and he did a Beck album in jazz style.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And that was always really inspiring to me. And then, you hear Schofield and Krasno versions of Beatles tunes online.
The Bad Plus, they're famous amazing covers.
So the Bad Plus did a Blondie tune, and they did
Teenage
Smells
Spirit.
Like Teen
So,
Spirit.
wow. You got to go hear that if you're out there.
I have not heard that. That
immediately.
sounds amazing.
It's really good. It was always inspiring when I was young because the drummer was just killing on it.
Yeah.
And,
Do you know Brad Meldow? Have you listened to him at
Brad
all? Just
Meldow's
Radiohead, incredible.
And of course, your name, Jazz is Phish, is a play on Jazz is Dead, right?
Yeah, so it's definitely a direct nod to them. We didn't want to skirt around the issue,
Right.
And, Jazz is Dead was really a powerhouse group. It had at times Jeff Sipe, but Billy Cobham was the original drummer who, talking about Weather Report, or actually it wasn't with Weather Report, but played with John McLaughlin and Miles Davis.
Right.
Jimmy Herring was in there, right?
Jimmy Herring was in the group.
I started with
Alfonso
T.
Johnson.
Lavitz. I saw that lineup.
T. Lavitz.
Now gone.
Exactly. But Alfonso Johnson, who was in Weather Report, and what's funny, there's a lot of connections actually. But Alfonso was the original bass player for Weather Report, and then Jocko took over.
Right.
And
now you have Jocko's son.
Yeah, Jocko's son Felix plays with us.
I didn't know that, you guys.
And I was really sort of Adam and your brother Matt took me backstage to meet, and there's a couple sort of Phish connections and some alums back there. One of them, of course, was Michael Ray.
Yep.
That was really interesting seeing him again. He totally didn't recognize me, but that was fine.
Yeah, Michael, he's on another planet, and he'll be the first to tell you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think
space is the place.
Yes, absolutely.
I think I might have interrupted him from a visit from space briefly.
Yeah.
I think he went right back after he shook my hand.
It's funny. I reached out to Michael about the project. I'd already talked to Jeff Coffin and a few other people about it, and everybody was really excited because there's a lot of respect for Phish amongst a lot of musicians who, whether or not they would ever cover Phish in like a traditional sense or or go to Phish shows or not. There's a lot of respect.
Right.
People really appreciate the compositional elements and
Right.
improv and just them as people and what they've accomplished as musicians. So there was a warm reception. I mean, especially with musicians like Jeff Coffin, they just wanted it to be original and different and something cool to get behind it. And I remember reaching out to Michael Ray. I sent him an email thinking, I probably won't hear back from him for a while. My phone rings with a number from France, and so I was like, maybe I should answer this. So I answered it. It was Michael Ray calling me from France, and he was so just happy about the idea, really just turned him on. He was so excited because he loves all the guys and obviously the music as well.
I was excited to see him with you guys when, I guess it was for that Bernie Sanders tribute. I think he was on stage for that, or was it when I saw you?
No, it wasn't the Bernie tribute.
It was the Hall and
the Hall
MP,
and MP show.
And I hadn't seen him in about 10 years, and I was a big Sun Ra fan, so it was great. I was really made it work for me. It sucked me in right away. I'm like, oh my God, Michael Ray's here. And then, the music, of course, you guys did was amazing on top of it. But
yeah, that was actually the first night Carl Gearhart had ever played with us as well. It wasn't Michael's first show with us, but it was Carl's first show. And he was part of an arranging session we did, and I brought him down to Asheville where Mandy and I live, and he flew down, and Kofi Burbridge, who's with Tedeschi and Trucks and who was on Surrender to the Air with Trey.
Yeah.
He was also an aquarium rescue unit with his brother O.T.O. Burbridge. He and Michael Ray and Chris Bullock from Snarky Puppy and a few other musicians all came down, and we kind of bunkered in. And I had sent out some tunes before, I kind of went through the Phish catalog and found some songs. Okay, I want to work on these. And Chris Bullock and Scott Flynn, a trombonist who went to Berkeley, he's an amazing trombonist.
Right.
They worked on just kind of figuring out ways to adapt melodies, vocal melodies into horn parts. And then we got into the room, and just everyone looked at the horn charts, and we just contemplated, okay, what is this going to be? And so Alumni Blues, which the Phish played last night, which we did our version on the boat, pre-show.
Oh, okay.
Michael Ray, we were like, how do we make this, have its own feel, a different feel than the way Phish does it?
Yeah.
Michael Ray, being a musician, from New Orleans, he really wanted to have this New Orleans vibe for it. So,
For Alumni.
So the way we do Alumni, it's a second line New Orleans shuffle almost throughout.
Can we play a little bit of that now?
Yeah, sure.
All right. that's really great.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's so
really
cool.
like it. You know, the idea and to make it New Orleans, I think it really comes off good. And then when it goes into Letter to Jimmy Page, it has that same form. It goes into the true form,
Right.
back into the Alumni second line, which is
Right.
nice.
Yeah. I love how that's sort of a 2-for-1. You know, when you hear Alumni, you're going to get Jimmy Page. That was great. So we just recently got that too.
Yeah.
And you played a pre-Phish show
Yeah.
on the boat, right?
Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah, I missed that. I'm sorry, but that's really cool. So you guys were totally in the mood, and then you got that song.
Yeah, it was great.
Well, let's deconstruct a little bit your process. So, I believe one of the first songs that I really liked that you guys were playing, and I started questioning, how do they do this? It seems like you're almost like playing a trick on the audience, like, and we'll play it after I kind of intro it now. But "Story of the Ghost," for example, you. And tell me if this is kind of a formula that you guys apply to your approach. Come up with like a crazy sort of funk groove, and then add the horns as the melody. Is that like a general formula? Because as you'll hear right now, we'll play a little bit of Ghost. But, like, for example, you can say the same thing about Bathtub Gin, too. It's like this, there's no way you'll know what song this is until the horns come in.
Yeah, and even sometimes it takes a minute, you know, before we get that crowd reaction of like, "Oh my god!" and you can like hear the gasp or the applaud. And
And you do that on purpose, right?
yeah, well, I mean, it's part of it is that, you know, we want to put our own identity into it, and I'm, you know, getting lots of musicians who I like getting musicians who aren't as familiar with Phish, some of them who haven't even heard the music, because there's no preconceived notions of what something should be.
Right.
So when these musicians come in and they're part of this collective session of like rearranging, you know, I wouldn't even sometimes let them hear the song. I just show them the chart, and so then they're able to like, man, I hear this just reading the notes. You know,
that must be unusual when they finally do hear. Have you had any experiences with that?
With Chris Bullock, he did the arranging of the chart for Alumni Blues. He was a part of that, but he hadn't heard the original version. So the chart started with Scott Flynn, you know, notated it, and then we tweaked it in our session with Michael Ray and Chris Bullock. So he was part of us like arranging it, but without hearing the original. So last night when they started playing it, I had to tell him, I was like, "Hey, this is the song.
This is the song that you just worked on for a long time."
And
wow, that's funny.
so it was really cool, and he was really into it. And
what did he think of the concept of the, you know, because just seeing the charts and just playing with a band, you don't really have a concept of what it's even about. All he knows is the title. Did you get any reaction? Some songs, Phish lyrics could shock you.
Yeah,
and I imagine like your fellow bandmates playing a song that they have no idea what it's about, then hearing the Phish version and getting surprised.
Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. Anthony Wellington toured with us for a while. He plays bass with Victor Wooten, which I know a lot of people who are hearing this will be like, "What? Plays bass with Victor Wooten?"
Right.
But
Victor needs another bass player to.
Yeah, so Anthony like plays more like chordal bass
and Victor's lead bass.
And Victor's lead bass. So Yeah, Anthony, I remember we did an arrangement of Dog Log where we made it, like a jazz tune, because it already has like a little bit of a swing feel, and we just exaggerated the swing feel and took out like the part in 7/8. We made that like a Miles Davis feeling trumpet solo, jazz vibe.
So we're gonna listen to Dog Log.
So a Dog Log, we worked on it for a while, and then Anthony Wellington came up to me and he said, Dog Log, is that about what I think it's about? I was like, probably.
Maybe, yeah. These guys are so good, they can just read charts and go in and add their own feel to it.
Yeah.
That's why it's so intense. I guess there's some people that don't know Phish at all on that stage playing. And then there's some people like you and your brother who know it like inside out.
Yeah, we keep it grounded, so it's like the fans know what it is a little bit.
I should add, so Adam is the drummer for JazzIsPhish, and his brother Matthew is an amazing guitarist, but way understated. Like, when you see Phish, it's Trey, it's like the Trey show sometimes. I always want Paige to be turned up, but Trey.
He has been this week, I think.
Yeah, I've been hearing Paige quite a bit.
Yeah.
Very good sound in MSG. Always they get MSG dialed in very well. But in JazzIsPhish, you're kind of thinking, where's that guitar? I find myself and tremendously talented guitarist. You want it to rip a little bit, and he's just doing chords, kind of. Just chilling. Every now and then he steps up.
Yeah.
But, you got a lot of people on stage. So.
Exactly. And when my brother and I were younger, he was always in all of our bands. He got a solo on every song. And
so he's had enough in his life, you're saying?
Well, no, I'm more commending him for his self-control. We're playing with horn players who played with Miles Davis and, just, Snarky Puppy guys and just these musicians who are just so good. And when you have, full horn sections and you have people like Felix Pistorius who play bass, I'll compare him to his father talent-wise, but he definitely has his own, sound and approach.
But he was playing a fretless, I think.
No. He does little things that kind of sound like that, but he's got his own, bass. It's fretted. He, I think that's an intentional thing to kind of have his own sound as well. It
sounds like from note to note, it's so smooth, his playing.
Yeah, his playing is, if anyone has a chance to see him play, whether it's on tour with Jeff Coffin's Muted or with us, or just find him. His playing is monstrous. And
he's monstrous, and he's so understated and such a nice guy. And from what I hear, his dad is kind of like the opposite personality.
Yeah, it's funny because people were like, will ask like when they find out he's playing with us, like, oh, does he like throw basses up in the air and like kind of get up in the front of the stage? Like, no, he's really the opposite. He sits on a stool typically.
He was kind of in the back, sitting down.
Yeah, hangs tight, but when
just
you hear
nailing
him,
it.
Yeah, it just pours through.
Adam, I'm really I'm interested in how you like pick which Phish songs. Do you do ones that you think that'll fit in perfectly to your format, or you're just picking like your favorite ones, or like what makes you grab certain tunes that you guys are doing?
A lot of it is just listening to, when we're contemplating which songs, we're really thinking like, what can we put our own, spice into? A lot of it has to do with the, the vocal melodies, like, will these melodies translate well into like a horn section?
Well, I think that's what we got listening, today we were just like, checking some of the stuff out, and it really is I commend Trey because some of those melodies, and I guess that's what gravitated you to them, really transcend perfectly. So I see what you're saying, and I made me think, wow, I wonder if this was played in a different other format, would that melody still work here and there in all different styles?
I think that our project is actually a big nod to Trey's melodic sense, and really all of theirs, because obviously he writes the majority of the tunes, but not all of them. But I think that sometimes, when people aren't familiar with Phish, or maybe it's not their scene, or they come from a different music world where it just wouldn't speak to them if they grew up in the 60s in an urban neighborhood, like whatever. There's different musicians that we work with that just come from different backgrounds. I think it shines that the melodies are really strong. And we do have to reharmonize some stuff for the horns, but like the fact that they can translate so well to horn lines where as a listener, you don't feel like you're really missing anything because the melodies are so strong. I think that's a huge testament to
That's awesome, and it's something that kind of like as a lyricist and growing up with him that I've kind of always taken for granted, and it's probably also why I can't write with many other people, right? Because I've just assumed like, oh, just turn that into an amazing melody, and it doesn't come that naturally to other people. But it doesn't. I mean, not that it's. I mean, it does come naturally to Trey, but he works his ass off. There's no one that works harder than Trey in the business. He's never ever not busy, not doing music.
I think that was a big attraction to me when I was a younger musician listening to Phish too, is that, you have like Frank Zappa, who I compare Phish to a lot, which I think people typically compare him to the Grateful Dead, but for me, it's more like Zappa than the Dead, other than in like the kind of open-ended exploratory jamming.
And the audience kind of experience.
The audience experience, definitely.
Yeah.
But I feel, especially in the early compositions, which, I got into them in the early 90s when a lot of their music was like bigger kind of prog rocky compositional work. You were a part of all of that. The early stuff always, all of it really blew my mind that a fan that wasn't a musician could go to a show and sing guitar melodies, could sing the guitar part to Divided Sky, for instance. A non-musician would be singing guitar melodies. To me, that was like a testament also of how strong the songwriting was, because to make this brainy music palatable and, for such a obviously big audience, I think that's a big part of it, was just the that melodic ability that Trey has.
Yeah. It occurred to me, so I talked earlier to another Phish cover band, so to speak, not so much a band, but Holly Bowling. Mm-hmm. And so she referred to her approach to Phish's music as sort of a deconstruction. And it really has to be, because she's thinking of leaving stuff out in order to put the entire song, including percussion and melody and lyrics, into two hands on a keyboard. Now, you guys don't have that problem. You guys are spreading it, in fact, even across more musicians.
Yeah.
So you have a different sort of deconstruction job, meaning you have to give each person a tiny slice of the whole song. And is that you doing that, Adam? Are you doing that writing, or you're talking to people like charting the horns and doing stuff? Do you and your brother first come up with the groove, bass and guitar? Like, how does that work?
So it's funny because when my brother and I pick the songs, we go back and forth a bunch, and then we'll take the list of songs, and then we'll contemplate like, okay, how do we want this to sound? So we'll write out descriptions of like, if this had like, if we made this odd time signature that was even, or if we
just in English right now, not
just in English,
yet.
not notating it, and we just kind of write notes for everything. So like we intend to tell, predict the outcome with our notes, but a lot of times once we get all the musicians in a room, it takes its own flight, So like Carini, we were hearing it as like, like an impression sound, like kind of like dipping into like a Coltrane vibe with it as well. And we brought it to the table, and Kofi Burbridge was part of that session, and he heard this like kind of funk beat, and Chris Bullock was like hearing this intro that was just like a horn bass intro, so that took its own thing. So like the song starts and you think you're listening to like this kind of funk song, and then all of a sudden you hear and like come over it,
the rock part.
The rock part, but it stays funky on the backbeat.
Wow.
So that was we my brother and I thought it was going to end up being like swinging, like fast, acid jazz, and then it went in a different direction once.
Which
we got
is fine because that's what the band was comfortable with.
Yeah, so
That's
I think
cool.
there's definitely a collective approach. So we have typically, like I said, Chris and Scott, doing like the charting of like the melodies, and then Matt and I try to contemplate what it's going to become.
Right.
But really, ultimately, it's when everyone's in a room, and we cycle out who gets to be in the room, so that it always changes. And
there's always some writing shifts changing.
Yeah.
So that people get to add their own.
Yeah, and
touch.
actually, what we should play this track too. So when we did Maze, Justin Stanton from Snarky Puppy, he plays the Rhodes and trumpet with them.
Oh, yeah.
We put the Maze chart in front of him, and he had never heard Maze before. And he was just looking at the chart, and he's reading it, and he's like, "This reminds me of a Miles Davis track." Hold on one second. He pulls out his phone, and he pulls up this track.
It's incredible.
And he plays it into our PA system, and he starts playing the chart over top of it, and it fit. And so we're like, okay, we altered the feel. It still feels like Maze, but it's just. I think if you didn't know the Miles Davis track, you might think, oh, they didn't learn the right rhythms or this or that. But it really, we blended those two songs together.
That's so cool.
So that was cool, and that's part of like why I like having these different musicians, because these cats who play with Miles Davis, or like the Snarky Puppy guys who are all like super students of jazz, they will know tunes that I haven't even heard yet, and they'll hear things and apply it. So like I love bringing different people in who like Michael Ray with Sun Ra. Like he's brought some, like when he first started touring with us, he played us this Sun Ra show where the intro started with this cacophony where everyone was just like going nuts for like a full 3-4 minutes, and Sun Ra is up there being like
you could do that in
dramatic.
The end of Theme from the Bottom, it descends.
Oh yeah. It's very much like that. But we would start the show with that. So it was pretty early on when we started playing with the band. So people were coming to the show having no clue what to expect. Thinking that it's going to be like right off the bat, like I don't know. And we just come off with this cacophony, like smack them in the face with it, and then wherever it went from there was like.
Phish collectively as a band will jump off a cliff, and do the type 2 type jam or whatever. Now, is it correct to say that jazz lets an individual solo while the others sort of are maintaining a structure? Or would you say you guys also collectively jump off a cliff, or that's too many people to jump off a cliff?
Sometimes when we get into like our 13-piece bands and 14-piece bands, it becomes like a big band orchestral kind of thing.
Right.
So there's less jumping off a cliff. Usually when we get into like 13 to 15-piece bands, but when we're like 6 to 8 people,
there's more people to land on when you land at the bottom of the cliff.
True, very true. But even when we don't like jump off a cliff per se, in a way where it's like completely throwing caution to the wind.
Yeah.
I think the nature of jazz is where jam music stems from, because there's substitutions and modal changes and things that happen where what the form is, but if you listen to Brad Medlaw do rhythm changes, in the middle of it, you'll be like, what is this? Where's the one? Where's the beat? Like, it just goes so far from where the launching point that by the time it settles in, you realize that, jazz is the foundation of jam. And actually, as a Phish fan, the IT Festival, and I remember reading a quote on one of the walls the artist made, which was a quote out of the book On the Road by Jack Kerouac, which I guess may or may not have been why they named the festival IT.
Quite possibly. I don't know actually the origin of that.
So in the quote, it's the quote from Jack Kerouac is in a jazz club watching a Coltrane-esque figure, play the saxophone with just crazy swing beats, and he was talking about the improv, saying that whatever it is, that was it, and that's not the exact quote, but I read that quote. Right. It's like, man, I wonder if that's where they got, the name of the festival from, because it which is described in terms of jazz from Jack Kerouac, is that essence of just jumping off the cliff and seeing what happens.
Right.
And, just so like
That's
even,
like the whole Beat generation kind of based their existence on.
yeah,
Sort of
just free flowing stream
existence.
of consciousness life.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. You have two bands, right? Two primary bands?
Yeah, so like the main thing I play out with is JazzIsPhish, and then the James Brown Dance Party is my other main like performing project. Where with that project we play with James Brown alumni. We just play with Fred Wesley and Fred Thomas. Fred Thomas was James's bass player for 30 years, and Fred Wesley, everyone knows him. He wrote a lot of stuff that James played on with the JBs.
Yeah.
And, So we did a show, and that's like celebrating the music of James Brown with different musicians as well. It's also a collective.
Nice.
The show we just did, we had members of the Dap Kings and Wolfpack, and James Casey from Straight Anastasio Band, and a bunch of other people. So that was super fun, and I like the kind of multi-generational celebrations of music too in that respect. Like we had, the guys from James's band were in their 70s, and then, all the way down to like 20-year-olds in the group, and that's just really fun. It's like a passing of the torch, and
right. It has the word party in the band too, which
it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, what's the history of JazzIsPhish? When did you start, and how many shows have you played, etc.?
Sure. We started in September of 2015. That's when we did our first shows and started arranging the music. And we actually in 2015 we probably only did 5 to 10 shows tops. And then we picked in 2016. Probably only did some 20 shows. It's somewhat rare. It's a rare treat.
Oh, okay.
We do short tours, small tours. A lot of times it's like pop up things. The nature of working with musicians who are on tour with Kool and the Gang and Snarky Puppy and Dave Matthews Band. All these a lot of times it's a challenge just to make one show happen, let alone a tour. So when we do like a long week-long tour, it's like that's a huge accomplishment.
Do you have any good tour stories, like what's like been your best reception and worst possibly?
Sure. It's hard to say what the best reception is.
We gave you a good one, right, at Wonder Bar?
Actually, yeah, the Wonder Bar show was amazing. Everybody was really into it, and what we found is a lot of times people are really like they come in not knowing, like yourself.
Yeah.
And so once like they really figure out what's going on, it just the vibe just is so good. People are so happy, and
I noticed people like started out sort of like with a big semicircle like distance, like the respectful jazz listening distance maybe.
Yeah.
And then it got closer and closer when they realized, we can dance to this and it's Phish.
And that's the thing too. Like people hear the word jazz, like JazzIsPhish, and I think they think it's going to be like a sit down, like
martini
bar, like guy smoking a cigarette, drinking a martini.
Where did you see them first, JazzIsPhish, Mark?
I saw them at the Hall at MP in Brooklyn.
Yeah,
it was an amazing show.
So that was back in.
That was I think 2016.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then your album, He Never Spoke a Word, came out in 2016 as well.
27. It just came out this March.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, okay. That's
that was a long process because we have almost 20 musicians. Holly Bowling's actually on the record.
Yeah,
and we got Dennis Chambers, who played with Miles Davis and Coltrane. He was
Where'd you record that?
Santana. So that the part of why it took so long to produce is we did sessions in New York, we did sessions in Baltimore, we did sessions in Atlanta, just to be able to include more musicians. And then there was remote sessions, like Carl Gerhardt recorded his parts in Rhode Island, and so it was people all over. So it was
distributed studio sessions, so to speak.
Which is amazing because when you listen to the album, you wouldn't know.
It doesn't sound no.
It's very well mixed, and I think a lot of that credit would go to Bryce Goggin, who is. He
works with Phish.
Yeah, he works with Phish. He did a bunch of Trey records and Page records, and then I
Bryce
believe
is an engineer, producer.
Yeah, he did Round Room and maybe Farmhouse as well.
Nice.
So you told us a little bit about some good receptions. How about bad? You have any?
Well, so in a previous project, it's just a funny story. So I thought I'd tell it. We were doing Phish when Matt and I were younger, and we went down to Memphis, and we were doing a show. We were playing like a set list that Phish had done, and it encored with Rocky Top. And we were very unaware of the college sports culture in the South. We both grew up in Baltimore, and there's like.
All right, now hold on. Rocky Top, Tennessee. Memphis is in Tennessee.
That was our thinking.
Yeah.
Memphis is in Tennessee. Rocky Top, Tennessee.
To me, I think it's okay.
Right, that's what you would think. So we had it was a great crowd. There was 400 or 500 people. Everyone was rowdy. They were loving the show. Every note of the show, they're dancing, they're cheering. So we come out for the encore. We started on Rocky Top, and all 400 people booed us.
Wow.
In unison. It was amazing and terrifying.
Clearly, the Yankees don't know what they're doing. So Knoxville, the Volunteers, that's their fight song, and Memphis is their rival team. So when Memphis people hear...
It's the worst song you could have picked.
It was the worst song we could have picked to end a good night. We literally got booed off stage after crushing it all night. So that was a bad story. But it's still good because it's a memory. And actually, this is a good opportunity to talk about why I wanted to start this project, or why part of my motivation is there are a lot of jazz musicians who are turned off to the jam scene, be it Phish or the Dead or any jam 100%. Music. And I learned that when I went to jazz school, studied jazz in college. I was really into Phish in high school, and then right when I started college was 2000 when Phish took their hiatus. So it wasn't, I was like getting into all different types of music at that point. And I was talking about Phish with a college professor, and he's like, "Oh, that's not the kind of music we're going to be studying and stuff." And I was like, well, in my heart, I always felt like this, Frank Zappa's music, right? So Peaches and Regalia is in the real book, in the jazz real book. So, and, so there's no, without saying anything about the lyrics, they're like bad, but some people just don't understand the juxtaposition and why even the goofy lyrics really are so fitting for the serious compositions.
But maybe your guys' efforts will put some of Phish's stuff into the jazz book.
Exactly. That's that was my thought, is musicians, if they're closed off to it, for superficial reasons, in my opinion, then they're missing out on a wealth of just amazing compositional content.
I think, and I could be wrong, but I feel like the jazz jam gap is getting closer, and I think Kamasi Washington is crossing that gap, and Soul Live has helped us cross that gap, and obviously Medeski Martin would have helped us cross that gap. So I believe they're both actually starting to appreciate each other much more than they were.
I think you're right. And then if someone like me, who's like completely, grew up jazz free, completely jazz agnostic, so to speak, if that's the correct terminology, now listening to jazz through, people like JazzIsPhish, that's it. That's a good feather in the cap for jazz, right?
You might say, who's that Michael Ray? We came from Summer Orchestra, and they were a jam band too in their own way. They were just like a completely out there, open.
So speaking of Michael Ray, what's touring with him like?
Michael Ray,
because he's like such a character, and you said it before. Can you tell us anything about him?
Well, here's a good story to just encapsulate Michael Ray a little bit. It was actually a James Brown dance party show. After Michael had toured with us with JazzIsPhish, we were doing a James Brown dance party actually for a Phish After show a couple years ago here in New York. And Michael Ray and it brought the Kool and the Gang horn section onto the show. He played tours with Kool and the Gang now. Yeah. And we're in a groove, and Michael starts dancing, and the next thing I know, I look up, and he's in a full headstand, and he's in his upper 60s.
On stage,
in the front of the stage. He's standing on his head for the length of the groove, which was a 5 to 10 minute groove.
Wow,
and
incredible.
He's holding it, and everyone's going nuts. And his change is falling out of his pockets, and we're like, wow, this is amazing. And his family, his son was there. He was like, Dad, flipping out, And so he pops up, does like a spring kind of flip and lands on his feet.
Oh my god!
And he starts walking back, and my brother picks up a quarter that fell out of his pocket, says, "Michael," he throws it across the stage without looking. Michael grabs it out of the air, puts it in his pocket. He's like
Jedi style.
Yeah, Jedi style. Wow. So Michael is in the 60s, with Kool and the Gang, you see him, he's flipping around stage and just going crazy. And so, as a musician, he's out there in the best of ways. When Carl played with him for the first time, since they played together with Phish during the Cosmic Country Horns
Right.
era.
Yeah.
Carl pulled me aside at the end. He's like, Michael sounds like a synthesizer when he plays his trumpet. It's like, what is that?
Does he do something weird with the mic? And does he play through some effects sometimes?
He has pedals and he does loop station stuff.
Yeah.
When we first started playing with him, we would leave the stage with just him on the stage and say, "You do you," and he would loop stuff and create these soundscapes and a lot of times, Jonathan Scales was on tour with us with Michael Ray, and you actually saw Jonathan at Hall at MP. We had that 13-piece band with the multiple keyboardists and the steel drums. So Jonathan is a virtuosic.
Who were the two keyboardists on it? Was Todd Stoops and
Josh Thomas is like our main keyboardist. But yeah, Jonathan Scales is a virtuosic steel drummer. He's performed with Bela Fleck and the Flecktones, and he has an amazing project of his own called the Forchestra. After we finished our tour with Jonathan said to me, he's like, I feel like I'm playing with Miles Davis when I play with Michael Ray.
Nice.
Like when Michael Ray solos, it's like we have that authentic, old school jazz guy just taking us places.
Amazing. So what's in the future for you guys? You got gigs coming up?
We're working on some booking some more dates for late fall and early winter. Actually, our cruise that we just did was pretty much like the only thing of the summer. We especially with Phish doing their residency, a lot of times we don't really tour, play out while Phish is on tour. It just it's more of like letting they're different. They're very different. Yeah, and I want to see Phish too. So, but yeah, the pre-show was really cool. That's something I think we're going to do again. But we're going to this fall hit the road again. We're going to take the band into some markets we haven't been and show people what we're doing.
Yeah, well, definitely see JazzIsPhish if you haven't. They're amazing. Adam, you and I exchanged a few emails, and maybe we can close out with a little bit of music. You had mentioned specifically, and my notes don't say why, but you wanted Maze, and that might be the best way out. Anything else, Mark?
No, that was really interesting, and thank you. And you keep reinterpreting for us because, I will say one other thing. I'm not a fan of cover bands per se, unless they're reinterpreting and doing something special with the music. And right on, man. I think that's great.
Appreciate it.
I'm a fan of cover bands and a fan of reinterpretations. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, Tom.
And so much fun. Say hi to your brother for me.
Will
and
do.
Say hi to everyone in the band because they were so nice. Everyone I met was just really, really intense.
Yeah, that's
awesome people.
We try to keep good, not just good musicians, but good people around us because that's life is too short to deal with anyone else, right? There's a lot of really humble musicians that are just mind-blowing. So actually, you had mentioned the flute player from the show you saw. That was Jay Rodriguez.
Oh, okay, yes.
He had played with Miles Davis, and he was the founding member of Groove Collective.
Yeah, sure.
So, if you ever get a chance to see him, if you're in New York City or with JazzIsPhish, he plays sax and flute and alto and baritone. And
he was intense. I remember him in particular.
He does some show-stopping stuff, but the most humble person you'll ever meet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys all seem really humble and work really well together. So check out JazzIsPhish, and I really thank Mark Rechler for co-hosting with me, and thank you, Adam Chase, for coming all the way here for this talk, and have a great Phish show tonight.
Yeah, let's go. We got second half. Here we go.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
All right. I wonder how many of you are saying right now, Tom, this isn't Maze. You are correct. I'm playing Way instead because I'd forgotten that we already talked about Maze. Enjoy it and go see the bands mentioned in this episode when you can. Circus Mind and, of course, JazzIsPhish. Lastly, send your stories to fishtourstories@gmail.com.